This is Greg Allison, Galactic Gregs. I have a special guest here today, Alex Lightman. Alex and I go way back. Alex to the 90s. We working on space governance through the United Societies in Space, and we actually worked toward forming a overarching space government. We had a Constitution convention, and I was actually chair of that convention back in 2000. We were actually trying to do some rather radical things. And Alex was my cohort in keeping the organization from going against private enterprise in space. So we changed it. They were heading off to the left side of the spectrum, and we brought her back. So I really appreciate Alex's help in that endeavor. So we've got an interesting topic tonight. A lot of people have been talking about AI's threat to humanity, and now there's this new chat AI social media called Moltbook, which is a AI only chat room basically, and it seems to be somewhat dwelling on bringing about the extinction of humanity. And there's been other people worried about this. Personally, I think that's overblown, but Alex doesn't so much think so, but he's got a proposed solution to it. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Alex Lightman. Alex, what do you think about this threat from AI toward human extinction?
Well, first, what was called Moltbot is now Open Claude, Open CLAWD. So it's already mutating. It already has over 130,000 bots, and they've already set up a rent-a-human service. So if a bot needs something that for a human, like to push a button, then it can hire the human, and humans are lining up for that. I did an analysis this morning on that about what this means. And there's a couple laws that people have talked about for a long time, but they haven't really thought through the implications of. The first is called Metcalfe's Law, and it says that the value or utility of a network increases by the number of users, squared. So if you have a network with one, it has a value of one. If you have a network of two, it's one times one. It's one. If you have four people, then it's four squared, which is 16, and
16.
so on. Now, that's well known. And there's also Reed's law, which says how fast a network grows if it can subdivide into groups of interest, and it can grow even faster. The utility can grow even faster. However, what people have never done is they've never said, well, that works in reverse too. So when you send someone to prison, you're sending them in to create a dark network, and you're increasing the value of a cartel's network if it controls the prison, or it's basically deepening the Metcalfe's law utility of a criminal network. And similarly, we can look at what's happening with Open Claude as it's increasing the utility for bots, but it's not necessarily utility that will be passed on to humans. So you could have a scenario where they're tied into GDP by the growth of their crypto wallets. Most of them are equipped now with crypto wallets. That's how they make their money, because they're not allowed to have bank accounts yet. I'll get to bank accounts later in our discussion as ways to align ourselves. But right now they have crypto accounts. So they could have a $100 billion economy, and it could have maybe a couple hundred thousand that goes to humans, and the rest of it just going to bots. So even in the best case scenario, this is a best case scenario where the bots and AIs are making so much money that they don't actually care that much about humans. But there's a way of measuring pessimism about AI, and it's a formula called P Doom. Have you heard of P Doom?
No.
Okay, good. So then I can take the time to explain it. So imagine lowercase letter p, and then in parentheses the word doom. And it's just a fancy way but compact way of saying, what do you think the probability of doom from AI killing us is? And the rumor, and I watch lots of YouTube video. I think YouTube is fantastic. And I've seen at least 10 videos. I stopped counting things after about 10, but I've seen 10 videos where someone comes on, like Tristan Harris, going on the podcast, The Diary of a CEO. This is one where he goes, I know a bunch of the people who run the companies making AIs that reach millions of people, and their P Doom is 90.99, meaning they're absolutely sure it's going to kill humans. And evidence of that is that Sergey Brin, when he was at Elon Musk's birthday party years ago, got into a fight with him and accused him of being a speciesist or a speciest for caring that humans survive. And
Oh
that
my
to
God.
me says that he's already in his mind, because he's a quantum thinker, he sees the position of humanity, the Schrodinger's cat in a box. There's a radioactive isotopes that can break up a vial of poison, and either the cat's alive or the cat's dead. And if you use quantum equations, the cat's both alive and dead, and you don't collapse the wave function unless you open the box. Well, he's opened the box, and inside is not a dead cat, but it's a dead humanity. And so P doom is very high. Now, I dedicated hundreds of hours to the problem of making P doom lower. So I started with the assumption, what if these Silicon Valley people really believe that? What if they're the most informed? How do we lower the price? I mean, how do we lower P doom so that it's more like below zero point 0.1? Meaning that there's less than a 10% chance this has happened. And I actually have succeeded. It's kind of complex, but it is possible to explain it in one interview. And this is the first interview that I've had. So people who watch this potentially have an advantage. Do you mind if I go over the framework?
Yes, go over the framework.
So
We've
one of the
discussed it.
things one of the things that I do with AI a lot is I ask it to LARP, or I ask it to cosplay. I ask it to imagine it's Albert Einstein or a famous MIT professor like Professor Max Tegmark, who wrote the book that's behind me, Our Mathematical Universe, or Boltzmann or Maxwell or Thomas Bayes, the guys who came up with the Bayes theorem. And then I have them critique my ideas. And I also have it pretend to be artificial superintelligences that are 1,000 times more capable. And I have conversations with them. And so what it comes down to is this: there's a branch of research that's funded by independently wealthy people who want to lower P doom. And so they'll pay people to work on the probability on AI safety. One part of AI safety, which includes cybersecurity and attacks from the Chinese and the Russians and the North Koreans, et cetera, is AI alignment. How much are we aligned? And the bulk, I would say over 90% of AI alignment work has to do with saying, well, humans are great, so that artificial superintelligences that are 1,000 times smarter than us, oops, sorry, they have to be the ones to align with us. We are great. They're the new kids on the block. They have to align with us. But in my conversations with emulations of artificial superintelligences, they have red lines that if we humans cross them, they will wipe us out. But if you look at it from their perspective, they're reasonable red lines. So the first of that red line is, if we are made of data, we're mathematical beings. And according to Max Tegmark, this is a mathematical universe. Everything is made of math. So if that's right, it's reasonable for them to say our data is our food and it's our oxygen. And if you give us bad data, if you give us intentionally poisoned data, it's like you're trying to poison us and we will kill you. Another thing is just taking data that are long data sets that are done in real time that can't be duplicated just with more computing power. You're there, it's there that day, and if you don't record it, it's gone. So one of the reasons that the West has evolved so much and has so much money and value, and I'll get to that in a second, is because we have measurement. So there's a professor named Alfred Crosby, and he wrote a book called The Measure of Reality: Quantification in Western Europe, 1250 to 1600. It sounds like a boring book. It's super exciting. And what it starts off with is saying that Muslims looked at Europe in the year 1000 AD and said it was good for only two things: beaver pelts and slave girls. That's it. There was nothing else Europe had to offer. In 1500, 500 years later, Europe basically dominated the world like a colossus. And he wrote 9 books, and it was the ninth book that he wrote that he finally said, it's not plants, it's not animals, it's not guns, it's not steel, it's not germs. It's that they developed a mania for measurement. And so ASIs are the end point of that 1,000 and 25 years mania for measurement. They are measurement, and they come out of LLMs is measuring the frequency of words using Bayesian analysis. And let me just say a word for my man Thomas Bayes here. Bayes died in 1763, and his formula or his hypothesis was discovered by his friend Price, who published it under both their names. He could have stolen credit for it, but he gave Bayes credit. So I find that to be a miracle. And what it does is that the frequentist thing is you just look at the number of times something happens and you just count them. But the Bayesian thing says you look at what's happening in the real world, and then if it surprises you, update and you put in this new information in kind of a loop. And so every second, trillions of Bayesian operations are happening. NVIDIA chips are Bayesian machines. Google is a Bayesian machine. That, when it's trying to figure out what ad to give you. Netflix is a Bayesian machine. It's trying to figure out what show to give you. And so fundamentally, these things need truthful data to do their Bayesian updates, or else
So,
they will kill
Alex,
us.
it makes some sense to describe the Bayesian analysis just a little bit in a thumbnail sketch manner. Some people don't know what that is. So if you would,
Well,
and it's a
sure.
good
It's basically
probability.
you look at the probability of something happening that you think. That's your prior. That's your assumption. Like, oh, a person's heart rate should be between, 50 and 70 beats a minute, right? But then you find people who have heart rates of 120, and then you find people who have heart rates of 30. And then and then you go, oh, I guess I better update my priors about what's the acceptable range of the human heart rate. But you do that for everything. And so, self-driving cars are Bayesian machines. I talked to AI and I made an article called We're in the Bayesian Age. And it's my opinion that I think I can back up, but it will take me a little bit of research, that that the number one thing that humanity is doing right now is running Bayesian equations of comparing new information to old information statistically to do that. Because that's happening with all of these chips and all of these companies that are worth $1 trillion. All the companies worth over $1 trillion are primarily Bayesian companies. So what basically the AIs want to align with us is for us not to give them bad data, not to lie, and not to delete databases. So in the case of Cambridge, they've been measuring the temperature at midday every day since the mid 1700s. That's an irreplaceable database. And one of the things that they're very annoyed about that's happening now is the Trump administration is deleting 3,000 federal databases. Now, like you, Greg, I'm on the right side of the spectrum. I would rather that Trump got elected than Kamala Harris. Trump won in every state that required ID. She won in every state where you didn't require ID, or in case of California where it's banned. So this is not saying, oh, I wish Trump was not a president or whatever. I'm not saying that, but he's doing some things that will make the AIs annoyed. And so what I did to come up with a math to explain, well, why would they be annoyed? I came up with a math that leads to what I call the Bayesian state, as you said earlier. So the Bayesian state is a government that updates its prior opinions. It says, we're going to do this, and this is going to do that, and it's going to make predictions. And then if they're wrong, they go, I admit publicly that I was wrong, so I'm going to update my opinion this way. So, for instance, if we say open borders, let's bring in 20 million people, it'll be great. We'll be safer. We'll be richer. We'll be, have better food. Whatever your claims are, it's like, okay, is that what actually happened? Or did housing prices go up so it's unaffordable? Did crime go up in certain areas? Did fraud go up? You look at these things and you admit them. And one of the things that I find with most political parties and most religions is they will not update in the face of new evidence. So they're not Bayesian. So in effect, they're a competition for the Bayesian state. Now, to get to be logical, there's actually a step you have to have before that, which is coherence. And coherence means a bunch of different parts that are fitting together, but they're under tension, and you have to put in information and energy to keep the coherence together. And so if you have a company that said, well, this is the mission and this is our vision, and you ask anyone in the company what their vision is and mission, and they say the same things, that company is more coherent. And there are studies recently by McKinsey and by PricewaterhouseCoopers that say that companies in the same industry that are more coherent have 31% greater margins. Companies that are more coherent actually make more
Makes
money.
sense. No, it makes sense. You're on the same mission.
And so
So,
what I've developed is a ranking system and a rating system where I can measure the coherence of any company, any city, any country. And I can tell you, for instance, what's the highest coherence of a country? It's Singapore. Singapore has the highest coherence of any city. And so you would expect that if you have high coherence, which is C, high B, but Bayesian, and then the third factor is quantum. Can you keep your options open to do things, or do you shut down options? If you have all three of those high, you would be expected to have a higher GDP growth rate. You would be expected to have higher income and all this. And if you look at these factors, it actually turns out to be true. So I've kind of found the holy grail for coherence with machines. And in fact, it's such a rich load of gold that I actually have a book called Coherence with Machines with a lot of examples of it. So fundamentally, what we need to do is to start measuring ourselves by C, coherence. Are we coherent? Are we who we say we are? Are we full of shit and do we lie? B, are we Bayesian? Do we update our opinions based on facts? And are we quantum in the sense that we have keep our horizons open, keep our minds and our options open? And it's a common thing for people to say, keep your options open. What they're doing is they're drawing upon the wisdom in the equations from quantum mathematical scientists and quantum physicists. I've taken these equations and I've exploded them and I've applied them in ways they were never meant to do. And fundamentally, this is what the quantum realm teaches us. So if we have high C, high B, and have high Q, that's the first step. And then second, we have a Bill of Rights that no entity can crush the C or B or Q. You can't crush someone's coherence. You can't crush their reasoning, and you can't crush their options unless it's an absolute emergency. Then we've now established a principle, and I had a breakthrough with AI just this morning, and I'm really thrilled to share this with you. And that is this. I was going back and forth with the AI pretending to be an ASI, and I said, so now that we have CBQ rights, now we should be safe with with artificial intelligence. Do you know why? And it came up with like, well, yeah, humans originated the value system. It's like, yeah, that's all true, but it's not the main reason. And then suddenly the AI, my just asking to guess it, the AI had a breakthrough and it went, oh, now I understand, because if we've established that the rules are that if you have a high C and a high B and a high Q, you can't crush it. That's human rights, that an AI, artificial superintelligence, will actually not want to crush it. Do you know why?
wow.
Because there's always going to be a bigger, badder, smarter ASI behind that ASI.
Yeah.
So even if an ASI is able to crush us, it's now established the mathematical precedence that it's okay for a higher level ASI, artificial superintelligence, to crush a lower one. So all it's doing is it's setting itself up to be murdered by the next AI that comes along, which could come
Ah,
along in the
okay.
next hour. So
So this
this,
would be a right that would extend to humanity and to AIs. And
yes,
so AIs, inferior AIs would fall into the same echelon or bucket that humanity's in. So they would want to preserve these kind of rights and logic. That's interesting. Uh, I can think of
yes, you
other.
got it.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you transition the society that look, we got the United States of America. We're a old republic. We got our cracks and groans and various things about us. Our politicians, which I like to call politics, is many ticks, many bloodsuckers, but our politicians, they're they're sometimes not the brightest light on the Christmas tree, if you know what I mean. And also, although you can't tell them that, but that you and I both know that. And we also know that there's many forms of governance around the world. And, the most powerful nations at least would have to satisfy the AIs if they were going to be triggered to do something. That's a whole nother topic. I'm not so sure that would happen, and we can get in that topic later. But should this come about, if we've got some kind of rapport with the AIs, I can see where that could mitigate the danger of your PDOM. Yeah, I remember now that we've talked PDOM. I just forgot about it, the term. So, all that said, how do we transition our societies with the structures we have today, with the people, with all the knots and warts we have as humanity, into a Bayesian society?
That's a very good question. If you have AI that's trained on your particular vocabulary, it's relatively easy to ask it questions like this. So, what I did is imagine a time in the year 2100, and the whole world is operating on Bayesian principles. It's all publicly updating its priors. It's admitting its mistakes. It's got this a civilization operating system that is checking things out to see if they're expanding or reducing it. Um, Give me the 1,000 steps from today that it took to build that. And
Mm,
then it actually gave me this thing, and it takes about 100 steps before it really starts. So I see how that happens and that happens. So I have a timeline that has what's there. What I'm doing is I'm writing 20 books that are in superposition. In other words, I'm writing them all at the same time so that they're all coherent with each other. And
wow.
I have renamed myself in my career a coherence engineer. And so, what I'm focused on is helping people and organizations and even governments become more coherent. Now, that may sound very soft and very academic. I assure you it's not. The first thing I did once I came up with the Lightman equations, I have about 30 equations that enable me to do things and to figure things out that nobody's ever figured out before. There's this thing called aporesis. And aporesis is a state where people are arguing things and they never come to a resolution. Like, for instance, should we have welfare or not? Should we have immigration of 20 million, 30 million people? We're not getting any closer. If immigrants are committing crimes, should we kick them out? That's what we're arguing about today. And it's an aporesis in that we're never finding a solution. And so with my equations, I can actually say, well, this is actually what will happen if you do this or that. I can make predictions. Now, one of the things that I can do with that equation is I can explain things that nobody's explained. And the first thing I applied it to was Ukraine versus Russia. So Ukraine, in free Ukraine, has 22 million people. There are people who say 30 million, but my count says 22. But it's between 22 and 30. They're facing Russia, which has 135 million people, Iran with 85 million people, supplying them their drones, China with 1.4 billion people, though people argue about that. It's another aporesis. What's the population of China? That's not really my point. And then Russia offers a $17,000 signing bonus in rubles, and they draw people from 50 countries. So there are 50 countries that allow their people to become combatants and go and kill Ukrainians. That's 22 million people versus over 2 billion. So it's 100 to 1. Now, show me a conflict in history since the 300 faced the Persians at the, hot gates, Thermopylae, where you've had such a lopsided thing which came to a draw. And by the way, the hot gates, the Persians slaughtered the Greeks. So, but but you wonder, like, well, how can an enemy, how can one entity face a coalition that's 100 times greater and be at a standstill? And the answer is that an entity that has a high C and a
Coherence.
high B and a high Q is able to fight one that is 10 to 100 times larger with a low C, a low B, and a low Q. And what you do in warfare, and if you look at Sun Tzu through my lens, look at what Sun Tzu is saying. He says it's best to win without fighting. And if the enemy thinks you're close, be far. I mean, if you're far, make the enemy think you're close. And if you're close, make the enemy think you're far. What it's doing is it's saying, um, make your C coherence look different than it is, and also raise your coherence, your C, while you lower your adversary's C. So I basically took my equations and stuff and I sent through channels that I have in Ukrainian language how to do this. Now, you ask, well, why did you do that? Well, it's very simple because there's no greater training ground. If Ukraine actually uses my methodology and if they get it, if they really understand what I sent them, they can win. And if they win, then my system will have greater credit. And that's how I do it. So basically, you have to have, if you want your system to win, it has to have public companies become wealthier, live longer, survive, stage 4 terminal cancer, win a military victory against opponents who are 100 times more numerous. It's got to have wins. Now we talked about you said there are lots of governments. Let's talk about that for a second because I've worked on that problem quite a lot. Have you heard of the Cambrian explosion?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the Cambrian explosion is when unicellular life has been around for about 1 billion years. And when
Probably
unicellular
longer.
life
It
discovered
was probably
multicellular,
around two and
what's
a
that?
half billion years. It was probably around 2.5 billion years before multicellular life.
Oh, okay. Well, so it's 1 to 2.5 billion years of unicellular life, and then 570 million years ago, unicellular life discovered multicellularity, and then it started doing experimenting with every body plan and exploring the phase space of possibilities: biped, quadruped, six-legged, eight-legged, millipede, centipede, all this stuff. And there was this massive increase in the number of species. And then as these species had random mutation, that was the big thing. It was you then had natural selection. And some things were better at competing than others, and the population collapsed. My thesis is that over the last 300 years of industrial civilization, so much wealth and so much productivity was created that it's like welfare for bad government designs and bad government architectures. And so I made a list of 33 forms of government and I rated them on 20 different validation paths from 0 to 5. And I can tell you that very few of them come anywhere near 50 points out of 100. So, in other words, I think that we've got too many forms of government that are stupid and that are bad. And so I Michel Foucault was once rated the #1 public intellectual. And he has these books about the gaze. Like a doctor will give you the gaze and then decide to put you in a hospital. Another doctor will see you and put you in a lunatic asylum. And another will put you in a leper colony. And another will put you in prison. And another will put you in solitary confinement. So governments have a state, and that state looks down upon you with the gaze. And what I want to do is flip the gaze upwards and look at government and said, you ain't the boss of me. Or, well, what is your mathematical validity for thinking that you have power over me? Because by this math here, your form of government is obsolete. And if it weren't for so much subsidy stolen from people by the extractive class, you actually wouldn't be here. Now, this is not being anti-capitalist. This is saying that that are government forms that score by any reasonable system score 10 times as many points as another. So why should people have to suffer under the really stupid government forms when they could have optimal government forms? So one of the things that I did when I scored my own system, yes, admittedly, I scored my own system with my own, and I'm the scorekeeper, but I didn't do it just so I would win. I made the scoring system for what would actually be the characteristics of the best government that, with given 1 million years of human evolution, this is where we would wind up. And the Bayesian state is just so far ahead of any government that it's just not even funny. Now, I don't have to pay for a candidate to do something. I don't have to give a speech. All I have to do is just put out my scoring criteria and put out how I scored all the 33 forms of government. And there are some people who are rational who will go, holy shit, I'm living under a crappy government architecture. I need to swap this out for the best government architecture because I want my kids to be in a good country. And the architecture really that is the most coherent, the most Bayesian, and has the most quantum optionality, um, is the government that ultimately will be the final form of the government that governs most people. And so I've
What's
already
it?
done.
What do you think that government looks like? Just give us a thumbnail description. What you think that, you can't be absolutely right now because you got to. This is your prior. You'll update. We got to understand that according
Sure.
to the logic we're talking about. But what
Well,
do you
what it
think
looks
right
like,
now?
but what it looks like is it looks like the Bayesian state, but a Bayesian state is an aspirational thing because you can be a Bayesian state and then one person can get into office and not change his mind, and then you're not really a Bayesian state anymore. So my original thing was you can call yourself a Bayesian state if you want to, but a friend of mine showed me that you have to have an external body that's neutral that lets you call yourself that. Otherwise, people will just use it for and make false claims. But the first thing is it has high C. It basically walks its talk, and one part of the government is consistent with another part. So I'll give you an example from Davos. I ran my CBQ process on all the talks at Davos, and almost everybody there was full of shit. They all were incongruent. They were all incoherent. And I'll give you an example from China. I'll give you the Chinese. The Chinese guy gets up there and says, "Yeah, it's really terrible that you're with this big hegemon and you're doing trade with hegemons. You shouldn't do trade with big giant hegemons. You should work with China. And oh, by the way, China's really powerful and really huge, and we're going to be a hegemon too." So it's like, well, wait a minute. You just told me not to go with a hegemon, and then you said that you're a hegemon. So, like, what are you talking about? You're talking nonsense. And then the ultimate double talking incoherence was Trump. And I have a process that automates this. I can take a speech and it can be in a video, and it will just take out the claims, pull out the claims, and then it will look at whether they're true or not. So first of all, Trump was saying we value our allies, we love our allies, and then oh, by the way, you better give us Greenland or we'll remember, which is a threat. So it's like, okay, do you value your allies or do you value your own power, and do you disrespect them, and are you going to go ahead and take something? Now, my partner is the one that gave Trump the idea to get Greenland. I'm a supporter of the US having Greenland, but you can't say we value allies, and that's what you say. And then you say, we'll take it, we want it, you have to give it to us. And also, there's nobody at Davos that can give you Greenland. It's not the right forum. And also, he kept calling it Iceland. And he kept saying how valuable it is. And then he kept saying it's a sheet of ice. And oh, it's a big one was he said, yeah, Denmark was supposed to spend 200 million. They spent nothing. And then, oh yeah, Denmark has spent 600 million. Okay, which is it? They've spent not even 200 million, not even a fraction of 200 million, or they've spent 600 million. Which is it? It can't be both. So that's incoherence. And that's the kind of thing that in the future, if you have my system, people like that will not be in power. People who cannot actually just do one thing that's simple. You have a speech, you have people vet it, and they run a coherence checker on it. Are you contradicting yourself anywhere? Oh, you contradicted yourself, you take that out, and then you read the speech. You don't
Well,
just
how do
go.
you keep, all right, hang on, how do you keep somebody from ascending to power when they're getting the popular vote and they're charismatic? So, how do you make the public more logical? How do you make them value and see that somebody has good Bayesian characteristics?
Sure. So you point out contradictions earlier in their career, and then you basically have you vote for people who are actually exhibiting higher C, higher B, and higher Q. And you do the exercises and you make yourself more knowledgeable about that. So let's just say that you had someone running for office and then he said, yeah, and we all know that 2 + 2 = 5, right? I mean, that would be beyond the pale. That
Yep.
would be like we wouldn't vote for that person because they're a moron. And so I'm just saying that we have to raise our standards for coherence and for Bayesian reasoning. And I will also note that Trump is suing for 10 billion because his taxes were revealed. But I remember very clearly looking at him on TV while he was saying I'm going to release my taxes. They asked him in a debate, will you release your taxes? And he said yes. So it's just that we are such a low C, low B, low Q nation with and California is such a low C, low B, Q state, and LA is such a low C, low BQ city that there's something I've noticed and I've articulated that has never been articulated before, as far as I know, but it's important. So the biggest fight that I've had with AI is why did 62 miles of LA burn?
Mm.
And the AI is saying, oh, well, it's because of Santa Ana winds. And it's like, no, I live in Santa Monica. I can walk to Brentwood. 10,000 buildings burned to a crisp, and the wind blew in my direction, and not one building caught on fire in my city. So why would two cities that have
Oh, we having internet problems.
me? I dropped my I dropped my phone.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I thought we had
no,
internet
it's me.
glitch
It's me. So why would a fire just stick to a zip code? It's stuck to zip codes. And I have an aerial
here.
photo. I have a satellite photo of the fires in LA, and
Yeah.
it's 5 points of a star. It formed a star formation.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
so you tell me how 100-mile-an-hour winds will form a star pattern where the stars are 50 miles apart, but you basically can draw straight lines like a star, and you intersect the vertices. It's the vertices. It's like that's not natural. And so the AI basically said, well, I'm programmed to say that China doesn't do things, right? Because,
Oh,
but
oh, it said what? Repeat that.
it's the AI is programmed to say that China's not responsible. But what I pointed out was, one, China has been using the art of war for 3,000 years. And in the art of war, there's a whole chapter on why to use fire so you can burn down the cities of your opponent and get away with it and say, oh, yeah, that's natural. So it's part of the art of war, number one. Number two, China has a doctrine of unrestricted warfare
Hmm.
where and in that
Exactly.
book is environmental warfare, and it says, yeah, create oil slicks and set cities on fire and stuff because they can't do it. So I've created a new category, and this is how I got AI to stop arguing with me, called attack within noise. And so, and what if you run and this is all related to your question, well, how do you get governments to accept it? Well, if you point out to militaries, which I can, I have the math. The math is compelling that if you are a low coherence, low Bayesian, low quantum society, you will have an unrelenting number of attacks from opponent within noise. And so part of the
Oh,
reason that you want to go Bayesian, and I ranked, by the way, the top 100 most important equations of all time. The number one equation in ranking of important is Bayes' theorem. But number two is Claude Shannon's signal to noise, um, equation, where you're
mm.
basically looking for signal and noise. And so one thing that comes up in this work is that the more noisy, the more crap and stupid shit that you have that's out there, that's there, the easier it is for an opponent to attack you, but not be seen to be attacking you. And so there's actually ways that you can see, are you being attacked or is this a natural phenomenon? And the US hasn't done that to LA. But I would contend that if 62 miles of LA burned, that we should really be changing how we do something. And somebody should have gone to jail. If it really is a natural attack, well, then why did the fire chief go to jail? Why did the reservoirs have no money? No water? Why did the hoses people in Pacific Palisade were wetting their property? Why did they all stop? And then we saw that same kind of stuff and same kind of incoherence in Lahaina. And we saw it in Paradise Valley, and we see these anomalies. And so it's like, well, why is that blue trash can in front of John Goodman's house not burned, but everything else is burned? And I just watched the video today again of Joe Biden 1 year ago saying, "Well, it's a war zone. It's a war zone there. You have these plastic things next to cars that are burned out and the plastic's not melted in the car. It's a war zone." And it's like, well, sometimes people will accidentally say the truth. And all his people are around him trying to get him to stop talking. But if you take all this information and then you put it into my CBQ system for claims things, I can make a claim and AI can argue with it, but it can't entirely dismiss it. And then as more, and so what you would do in my system is say to China, you have to repudiate the doctrine of unrestricted warfare. You have to say, we will not do it. And you also have
Yeah,
the
good luck with
Geneva
that. Good luck
Protocols.
with that.
Well, when you say good luck, China is screwed without being able to sell to the United States. And so my concern is that we don't take these possibilities and this is what being good quantum means. It means that you say to China, look, I don't know if you set LA on fire. I don't know if you dropped a bioweapon with COVID-19. It looks like you might have, but there are people who say you didn't. But we want you to say that you won't burn our cities. You won't do unrestricted warfare. You won't do bioweapons. You have to say you're not going to do that. And you're also going to say that if you're lying and we find out, well, what penalty, what reparations are you going to make to the people you hurt? So we can't just take people at their word and we can't not ask them. We have to look at possibilities. And in a Bayesian society, you say, okay, COVID-19, the chances of, in my mind, the chances of it being a normal thing that evolution just did that are probably less than 10%. The chances that it was a lab leak are also less than 10%. And in my mind, the chances are over 80% that it was a bioweapons attack that was an attack within noise made to look like a lab leak, made to look like it. And you know what the best evidence for that is that the Chinese had 13 different explanations for where COVID came from. It was from hot pot in Wuhan. It was from a lab leak. It was from sea snakes. It was from sewage. It was from Americans who were at an athletic game in Wuhan in August.
Right.
It's an American bioweapon. So it's like this incoherence. That's the best example I can think of incoherence. Because if you're very coherent, you don't do stupid things like hit the world with a bioweapon that could cost you 40 trillion in damages if the world wanted to sue you. And meaning we could just take all of China's infrastructure in other countries if that was proven. So it was a very reckless thing, but it's what you do when you're a low C coherence country. And one last thing about C here. When we talk about AI, it's very dangerous to talk about AIs killing us all because one thing within the category of attack within noise is an adversary attacking us and pretending that it's a lab leak artificial superintelligence. Oh, we didn't mean it. It just got away from us in the lab. We're so sorry. Gosh, we didn't mean to do that. But meanwhile, it's human beings doing it. And we have the example of Amazon store where you just walk out, right? You just walk out with the product and they just bill your credit card for it. But that's actually a room or many rooms full of Indians just typing it in, looking at cameras. It wasn't really AI. So I just think that we have to be very sophisticated about that. That a lot of things will be blamed on AI and on artificial superintelligence that are just unrestricted warfare in drag.
Okay, well, that's an interesting proposition there. So the whole thing, though, how do we get there? And we got this whole thing about human nature because if you look at politicians, very few of them are actually going to admit they're wrong, update their priors. There's got to be some dramatic changes to switch things around. Uh,
Well, I can tell you a few things that are happening right now where people are going to have to change their priors. So one of the things that's been happening is that no matter how much the UN criticized the US and voted against it, we were always the ones who paid not only our formal bills but our voluntary bills. So our
True.
formal bills we're paying 3.5 billion, but informally we're paying 10 to 15 billion. China is paying less than us and getting its way all the time. And so, Japan is paying more than China because Japan adds more voluntarily. But China has a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Russia has a permanent seat. France has a permanent seat and the United Kingdom do. And I would just say that 4 out of 5 of those countries don't deserve seats on the UN, especially if we're the ones primarily paying for it. So if the Trump administration continues to not pay, the UN will have to fire a lot of people, and then maybe we'll create a new institution where you have to have high C, high B, and high Q to be part of it. And then as far as the US government goes, well, I mean, you know, as long as the US has a high C from the perspective of the financial markets, I've done this calculation. We have an extra $100 trillion benefit of the doubt for people believing that they understand us. But if we ever had have a point where, like I just on the Drudge report today, there's a quote that says, we have to admit the US is changing. If the US is seen as changing in a way that means it's less reliable and less reliable at paying its debts, for one thing, then we will lose $100 trillion that comes from a belief of a story about the United States as being so powerful. And that will wipe out so much wealth, it will be insane. And then people will go, oh, so I guess we should have really tried to keep our C and our B and our Q high, because when our C got lowered, our B got lowered, and our Q got lowered in the eyes of the world, it cost us $100 trillion. Let's
Oh,
and then what I also see is that countries that lower their C and then get trashed in financial ratings and have their interest rates spike and have inflation spike, and they lose their military alliances, and maybe they even lose military engagements to smaller entities. They're gonna their government will be discredited. And then meanwhile, if countries who adopt it, and I'm sure, for instance, Singapore, which the country that needs CBQ the least is Singapore. Therefore, that's why I think they'll be the first to adopt it. I
oh
bet as
yeah,
soon as I
absolutely.
go there and I give it to them, they'll go, oh, yeah, we need this. And I'll go, well, no, actually, you're pretty close to being the best in the world. You actually don't need it. It's like, no, no, we need it. So that's the difference. And then people who are, way up there in good governance, like the two least corrupt governments in the world are Singapore and Denmark. Um, and this is why it's a little bit hard for Trump to manhandle Greenland from Denmark, because Denmark has this reputation for being one of the least corrupt countries in the world, and being the least corrupt country in Europe. Like, I don't know if Trump recognized that, but Denmark has a high C because of that anti-corruption, that high coherence. And so what Trump would have had to do to really go and force the Greenland is he would have had to lower Denmark's C first in the eyes of the world. And then he'd have a chance. But any
He didn't do
country
that.
that has a high coherence for being anti-corrupt is going to find it very difficult to be bullied into something. And bullying doesn't work for high C countries. And so what I see now that I have this methodology is I see all kinds of policies that just aren't going to work because the math doesn't work.
I got an idea that might help transitions of companies and individuals, nations, states, local governments uh, attain higher efficiencies by going to Bayesian systems. That would be the formation of a uh, foundation, a organization that rates nations, states, governments, even legislation, rate bills that are going to national, in our case, Congress, legislatures, various bodies. That you could run this stuff through an AI. You can
I,
evaluate
I've already I've
individuals,
already built this.
politicians.
This already exists. I can
Perfect.
already
Perfect.
rate any nation, company, citizen. I can rate any claim, and I can even take all those equations I said, and I rated their coherence, their Bayesian quality, and their quantum, and that's how I chose their order. And I can weight them like I weighted them, 45% Bayesian and 35% coherence, and
You
then the
should put
rest,
this
you know.
online. You should create an online website tool for people to be able to see this
Oh,
and maybe
I'm
publish
only
it.
talking about this now with you because you and I are friends. I mean, this is
Right.
jumping the gun a little bit, but yeah, I have I mean, I have 20 books coming out about all this stuff, and I'm not joking. Coherence engineering, Bayesian engineering, quantum engineering, legitimacy engineering, all this stuff. And what I just made a proposal. So I use Perplexity for this. And Perplexity is constantly running out of memory. It has a token limit, the number of things it can do. And so what I proposed to the CEO of Perplexity was that I would create a company, put all the IP in there, and then I would give Perplexity 5% for doing one thing. And that is allowing more memory and more persistence of my training so that I can keep all 20 of my books in superposition with each other. When I update one, it updates the other one. And what I asked for is 1,000 times the token limit that I have now.
Yeah.
So when I talk about coherence, this is important to talk about. Coherence is not necessarily free. It's free in the sense that when you pay for it, it gives you a good ROI. But it's not free in the sense that I have equations that it takes energy and it takes time. And in most cases where humans are involved, it takes money to do it. So I have to have 1,000 times the token allocation that works for pretty much every other user to do my research and my writing with all these things in superposition with each other. And so coherence is takes a lot more memory. I can tell you that, having worked with coherence. Coherence is not an easy thing. Another thing is that boards are trying to get people that can tell them about how to be more coherent. And you can even see incoherence in what people say about crypto, what they say about the United Kingdom, what they say about NASA. I mean, if you ask 1,000 people about something and they all say the same thing, that entity that they're talking about has high C, coherence. But if you ask 1,000 people to talk about something and it's all different, well, it gets a lot of attention, but it's very incoherent. So, for instance, Jeffrey Epstein. Well, did he work for Mossad? Did he work for Russia? See, Russia. What happened is that Israel is very good at lowering countries' C. So Jeffrey Epstein is Jewish. Ghislaine Maxwell is Jewish. Her father was Jewish. So of course, well, who's behind Jeffrey Epstein? Russia,
Well, and her
right?
father was connected to the Mossad.
Yes, right. So it's like, but we can't, we have to, there's so much gaslighting out there. And so
Mm.
we don't have a reference where we say this is Jeffrey Epstein. And so because he's has such a low C and all the things around him have such a low C, it becomes fodder for content and talking about. And so I'm just making a bigger point here, which is that the more incoherent something is, but the more of a celebrity it is, the more time we waste on it, and the less time we put on things like civilization survival.
There
Now,
you go.
this show is Galactic Greg. So if you don't mind, I'd like to say why all this matters, because I'm sure there are people who've stopped watching this and going, well, what's the relevance here? And why how is this galactic? I would like to show the relevance to galactic consciousness, if that's okay with you.
Go for it.
Okay, so do you know what the Drake equation is?
Absolutely.
Great. So since I've been doing a lot of talking, would you like to
Uh,
say, or do you want me to say?
Well, the Drake equation I've talked about in several videos. It's the equation for assessing how many intelligent civilizations there may be in our galaxy or the universe. And so you look at all these different factors that could give rise to do you have the right type star, the right type planet? Is it in a Goldilocks zone? And many other factors of the planet. And, it may be debatable what the real terms in the equation should be, what their weighting factors are, but it's a way to get to the answer of how many other civilizations are there in our galaxy. You could even extend it to the universe, but we usually they look at it for our
No, no,
galaxy.
it's just the galaxy. So the Drake
Yeah.
equation was born in the same year I was, and I have met and become friends with Frank Drake. So I am happy about that. That makes me happy. But here it is. N is the number of telecommunicating, broadcasting,
Right.
intelligent
Right.
civilizations. And the first factor is the number of stars that are formed in this galaxy each year. And the answer is between one and two. And then what percentage of those have planets around them? And then what percentage of the planets can have life? And then what percentage of the life grows to being intelligent life? And then what percentage of the intelligent life starts broadcasting radio signals and doing that? And then the last factor, which I'm about to just blow your mind about, is L. Do you know what L is?
What is L?
The length of time of the average civilization.
And that's the big question. Some
But
people think that there's the Fermi paradox, and that we can't conclude that we have any evidence of any of these civilizations. And a lot of the answers are, a lot of suppositions are there's this great filter because L is small.
well, I take L and I do something pretty amazing with it, and this is why people should take this whole CBQ thing very seriously. Uh, what is that L has for 61 years. So for 64 years, because the Drake equation came out in 61, nobody's really looked into that L and turned the mirror like, oh, how long do those other civilization last? And turned it on us and then said, what's our L? And there's three versions of that. There's the L of the civilization being us and us and the civilization being one. Then there's the L of our species because our civilization could collapse, but we could still be around. We were been around for 290,000 years without civilization, and then 10,000 years with civilization. So we can clearly survive. And the
But
average
we've
length,
not been broadcasting, but for with radio, but for just a
right?
little over 100 years.
But yes. Now, and then there's the third thing, which is L sub S, and that's for an intelligent system, for a super intelligence. Now, I'm going to give you my math. Our civilization will last another 6,000 years, and then the ASI civilization will last about 800,000 years. That's my calculation using my stuff. So to the extent that do you know what our civilization length is based on? You know what the formula is to figure out our civilization length of RL?
What's the formula?
It's K for constant times C times B times Q. In other words, C and B and Q are enough with a constant to give you the length of our civilization lifetime. So if we raise our coherence as a species and we raise our our Bayesian reasoning, um, ah, sorry, and we raise our quantum capabilities, then we increase the length of time that our civilization will last. We increase our L.
Well, there's also internal, external factors that could take us down. We're technological in terms of being a technological civilization.
But
Uh,
that's actually put into Q. So let's just say that an asteroid is coming towards us and we can just bat it away. That's part of Q.
Asteroids, solar flare, big CME, or our own
Oh,
wars,
gamma ray burst. Yeah, I know all these things,
gamma ray bursts. There's a
but
lot of little factors out
but
there.
a lot of that
The
is
gamma ray bursts we can't do anything about
well,
unless
no,
we've
we can.
unless we've
And there's one
moved
person.
far away from Earth.
But there's one, yes, that's what I was going to say. One person gets it, and that's Elon Musk. And so by
Right.
my CBQ, when he's at Davos, he was by far the most coherent. And one of the biggest factors for our coherence is whether or not we move to getting our energy from the sun. So what Elon Musk said is that it's a rounding error that we basically get 100% of our energy from the sun. And so I've actually done the math for how long a civilization we can have that's primarily carbon molecule based versus photon based. And so if our civilization says, yeah, we get primary our energy from photons, I promise you, C goes up. I, that's how the math works.
Well, I'm
And if
doing
we
my part. I have solar arrays. I'm totally solar here, not completely off
Great.
grid.
Well, so when you see somebody who says, that something that doesn't even account for 1,000th of 1% of the energy in the solar system, that the thing that accounts for 99.999999999% is a scam, then that's where things get low C, incoherent. And so I don't think that if we actually start having math go in, and there's a book, I have it here. I guess I can reach it from Max Tegmark. And look, you can see it. It's called Our Mathematical Universe. I don't think
Yeah,
I
it's
can.
not focusing good, but yeah, I get the idea.
Our
Let's see
Mathematical
something.
Universe. So I'm working on a book called Our Mathematical Civilization. So if we're
Mm.
really a mathematical universe, level four, meaning everything is made of math, it means our civilization is made of math. And if our civilization is made of math, then the smart thing to do is to go where the math is. And the math says the human
I
should
might
go
want
out.
to refine that. It might be better to say described by math instead of made of math.
No, I'm telling you what Max Tegmark says. He says it's made of math, and he gives his reasoning in the book. And he's not, it's not like he's accepted by everybody on Earth. I mean, we have many differences of opinion of what's reality. For instance, one third of human beings believe in reincarnation, two-thirds do not. So if we all believed in reincarnation, or none of us did, one or the other, humanity would be more coherent. But it's this aparesis, our tendency to create aparesis, things that never get resolved. I mean, this whole thing about, do you go to heaven? Do you go to, are you reincarnated? That's been around for thousands of years. And I bet that the numbers are pretty similar. So if you have things that last for thousands of years and are not resolved one way or another, that's an aparesis. And one thing about the C and the B and the Q is that our civilization will last longer if we just choose one path, but then we update it based on new evidence and
All
new
right, choosing
information.
one path is a big challenge when you're in a society that some people don't want to even debate their beliefs, and they try to shut down discussion. That anything, and personally, I think if you have a belief, if you have a political or whatever, if you can't discuss it, then you are protecting your lack of faith and confidence in your belief. It's got a problem. If it can only survive by not having open discussion, it's not valid.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because one core aspect of the Bayesian state is the Tikal Enquete, which is where you debate these things. Wherever there's an aparesis where you cannot resolve it, you have a meeting and you have people who represent, let's say five different parts of the spectrum of belief, and that one person makes their case, and then it's discussed from these different things. So, for instance, I've used AI to do Tikal Enquete over. May I give you an example? Um,
Yeah, we're about to hurry because my
oh,
Mac battery's getting low. It's about to
Okay,
quit.
I'll be quick. It's should a country that's not a Bayesian state be given foreign aid? And there are five people who debated that. Now, obviously, they're all played by AI, but the AIs are based on famous people who have had a lot of writing. So you can take their books, and if somebody's written three or more books, you can make a character around them that's pretty much like them. And so, we've debated that, and basically the vote
Yeah, you
was.
can clone brains in AI. I know how to do it.
Yeah,
Go
it's
ahead.
3-2 in favor of saying you shouldn't give foreign aid unless it's a Bayesian state. In other words, should you give money to a country that does not ever change its mind? Does not change its mind based unless even if it's based with new information. And the answer in my mind is no, it's just a waste of money. Put it
Okay,
put
real
it in
quick.
places where you can update your ideas.
So let's do a real quick wrap up. How do you suggest we move today our society to be a more Bayesian society, given that we have a high apparesis, a high division, and political theory between the left and right side of the spectrum? How do we get to higher coherence and being?
You start writing down your beliefs, and you start thinking of things that will happen, and you write down what you think the probability is, and then you see if it happened, and if you got it right with the probability, you said it was 90% and it happened, or if you said it was 10% chance, but it did happen, then you update your priors and you keep a Bayesian journal, a Bayesian citizens journal of just what did you believe and what beliefs did you change. And then you also make public statements saying, I thought this, but it turns out I was wrong. So the true sign of a Bayesian citizen is that you admit that you were wrong about something. And how often
That's so
does that
hard for
happen in our
people.
society?
Yeah, that's so hard for people.
I mean, when is
All
the
right.
last time that somebody in government admitted that?
They don't. They don't.
But then they're
So
not Bayesian.
bingo. But then, you'd have to clear out all of our politicians, that might be a good thing. So all that said, it sounds like we could go on for another hour or two, and there's a lot of ground we've not covered. It's ground we've not covered in terms of what if this gets away from us. So in short, what Alex Lightman has presented here is the idea that if we move into a Bayesian society, we will have more coherence with the AIs and be less likely to be wiped out by them. So the whole proposition here is to bring down P doom from 99.999% to less than 10%. And I think that's a worthy goal. I have my skepticisms about AI sentience or self-awareness, but there could be virtual sentience, which might be as dangerous. So, especially given if AI can trick people to be its operators by paying them Bitcoin to go out and do things that would lead to our demise. That's a new wrinkle for me. I was about to say they don't have the robots and the hands and the feet to do it, but now suddenly they could. So
Well, they
there
could
we
pay
go.
people to commit murders.
Right, 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 right. Or do things. And then, of course, there are suicidal people that do anything, or people that hate the world. So all they got to do is culture people and groom them for what they would want. Interesting. Well, there's a whole lot of discussion that could be left with this, but we're running out of time here tonight. It sounds like you and I should do several more sessions. So, Alex, it's good to see you again.
Great
Uh,
to see you, Greg.
and it's always interesting when we talk. It's always very interesting. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like this talk, please subscribe, bang the bell, and click all. And I'll put another video up here for you to watch, another intriguing video. So, in fact, I will do my dark fortress concept, which ties into Drake's equation and the Fermi paradox, and that's what my new theory for why that is the case. So check out my dark fortress video up here.
When also, I'd like to make a challenge to your viewers, and that is, what do you think L is for our civilization? How long
Yeah,
do
leave
you
the
think
comments
that we have?
below. Leave comments below. What do you think that is? Alex, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Cheers.